Welcome back to Talking Dad UK, and I'm joined by Rob from the Records and Bands podcast. And today we're discussing Woodstock '99, the festival, the music, and the controversy. Hello, Rob. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's kind of like talking dads, talking records and bands, going back in time 20 odd years to when I was 20 and young and skinny and girls found me interesting.
We,
Some of
we,
that is a lie.
as you say, you were a young man at the time of the festival itself in '99. I was a little bit younger. I was more of a kid, so my recollection will be slightly different to yours. But that is one of the reasons why I thought it would be good to for me to have a chat with you about it.
So one of my first questions for you was like, was what made you want to do a show about a festival? I don't know how old you are. You've probably been about 5 when this happened, I reckon, looking at you.
Would have been about 9, 10.
Right. Okay. I was 20. So why did you want to do a podcast about this 20-year-old festival that you won't remember? And
Yeah.
B, why did you ask me to do it? Is it because you value my input as a musical pundit, or am I the only person you know who was aware of it going on at the time and also owns a microphone?
um, so first of all, I watched the documentary, Woodstock '99 documentary, a good few weeks ago.
So that's the music box one that was on HBO in
Yeah,
America and was on Sky
yeah,
documentaries over here, isn't it?
yeah. That's the one. Really interesting documentary. I have seen the Woodstock '69 one, although it was a long time ago, and there's a there's a massive there's glamour around Woodstock '69, isn't there? And I know about it. I've heard of it. I've seen the documentary. I've listened to some of the bands and the music, and it is glamorized a little bit. Whereas this one, for all the wrong reasons, it hit headlines and it went wrong. And I know there was one in between.
Yeah, the one in '94 that generally gets sort of glossed over, and I think they all had their issues, and that one might have been the one that went the most smoothly. I
Yeah,
think in '69, because of the documentary that was met with, or the film that came with it. um I think there's a lot of rose tinted spectacles about it,
yeah,
and there's obviously different reports on what happened and things that went wrong and things that the organizers deny happening. I mean, in the first one, there was a thing about like the main electricity cable got exposed at some point because it got wet and it was underground, and then the main electric cable was exposed, and the insulation on it had so many feet going across it, it worn away the insulation.
yeah,
And I think like the chief electrical engineer had used the phrase mass electrocution.
yeah. With the wet ground.
But the organizers deny anything of the sort.
A hot weekend in July
Yeah,
on
on an air force base
on an Air
made
Force
out of
base
concrete with massive fences around it.
in New York, 350 odd thousand people.
Was that the number? Was it 350,000?
That's a number I found. They were expecting up to 400,000, but because the walls came down at certain points, I'm not sure if it's completely accurate.
Right, I
But
see.
350 is what I found.
They're $150 a ticket. One of
Yes,
the problems I feel that happened with this festival is the lineup is very aggressive and very male.
it's also all over the place.
We will get into this with the Metallica, but it's like all or nothing on one stage.
Yeah,
Yeah, but so in terms of the maleness of it,
hmm
you've got one female artist on the west, is it the west stage? One female artist each day. So you've got Sheryl Crow, Alanis, and Jewel.
yeah,
Now I sat down earlier and I just thought, right, 1999, what other not female acts, but bands with a good dominant female presence and that sort of thing in them were there that I can just reel off the top of my head that would still be in keeping with
okay,
the overall feel of the festival, the hard rock feel, the metal feel, if you like.
yeah,
Um, and this took me about 3 minutes to come up with. And I'm not talking about replacing other people on the band. I'm on about sprinkling them throughout. So I'm not saying Hole instead of Metallica.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying as well as. So
Yeah.
Courtney Love and Hole, PJ Harvey, L7, the Cranberries, who played in 1994. So there's a little nod back there for that.
Yeah.
Sonic Youth, one of the greatest bands of all time, with Kim Gordon. Slater Kinney, who were at the top of that sort of Riot Girl movement, they were still going there. No Doubt had one of the biggest records of 97 or 98. Garbage headlined Reading the year before. And the big one for me was, if Skunk and Nancy can headline Glastonbury that same year, there's got to be a place for them on a stage somewhere at Woodstock.
Yeah.
I then had to think about a few kind of softer but still in keeping bands, just sort of like take the edge off, or to cause a bit of a split in the crowd. Because like when I've seen bands, I've been to festivals before, and it's like, do I go and watch Jimmy Page and Robert Plant, which would be excellent, or do I go and watch Bad Religion? So there's always something to pull the crowd, where it all seemed to be like it's Metallica or Los Lobos.
Yeah.
It was all a bit weird. So, but like, even if they just managed to get someone like Smashing Pumpkins or Pearl Jam or REM or even bloody Match. So day one of Woodstock 99 is July the 23rd. That's the Friday. Now, the show opens with James Brown. Apparently, there's a bit of a kerfuffle about, the agents are ringing the organizers, and they're going like, he's not going to go on unless you pay him like 50% more. And there's a big row going on, and they, it's just like, well, if he doesn't go on, we haven't got a show. And then he eventually goes on. But even at the last minute, they're still haggling with him over prices.
Which reminisces back to 69.
Oh, right. How's that? Is it similar then, was it?
There was a lot of that went on with different bands and different acts, and the way of leveraging the organisers at the time was to turn up as if you were going to play, and then whether it was the bands themselves or it was the management behind them said, actually, we want a bit more money before we go on, otherwise we just go home. And whether the bands ever saw that or it stayed with management, I don't know, but there was a lot of underhand stuff that went on around that time, so I've read. But anyway, day one.
Yeah. No, that's cool. I think like the overall vibe as you entered this festival site is like hot concrete, loads of people, no organization, and loads of boobs.
It's excited kids turning up to one of the biggest festivals they've ever been to, welcomed by, as you say, a bit of chaos and a bit of everybody. They're getting frisked on the way in, and they're getting food and drink taken off them.
But not the drugs.
But they can keep the drugs.
And if you slip them a 20.
Especially if you slip them a 20. I think some alcohol did get in. I don't know how that was, but we'll come on to like security side of things.
Yeah. I did see a bit where they said that basically turn a blind eye to all the drugs and stuff as long as people aren't hurting each other.
Yeah, at the very beginning. Yeah. And but it just looks like that sort of 90s kind of spring break, kids out having fun, everyone's wandering around, enjoying it, trying to figure out where things are. It's all nice and fun, and like you say, there are tits everywhere. Women are walking around naked, as are the men, because it's so hot, or partially naked. And it doesn't take long for the famous chant from all the crowd, show your tits, to start raising its ugly head on all of the MTV film footage and all the other sort of private footage and stuff you can, not private, but stuff you can find on YouTube of people that recorded it themselves as they were walking around. It's everywhere. It's just tits everywhere and people shouting it.
Is kind of the Woodstock brand.
Yes.
But, and we'll come on to this, I'm sure. Right, so I've got so here we go. I've got a report here from Spin magazine, and I sent it to you, and it does get rough in places.
It does.
And I'm as we're talking about Friday, there is one description of sexual violence, which I feel we need to cover.
Yeah.
But it is rough. So when we get to it, I'll mention it again. So if anyone wants to switch off of that, switch off of that. But I don't feel comfortable not giving a warning.
Yeah.
And I also don't feel comfortable in not talking about it. I feel that the documentary it mentioned it, but it didn't. It kind of glossed over it a little bit.
It does gloss over a bit. It mentions it, and then it goes into slightly more detail later on, but it
Yeah,
doesn't. It doesn't go into full details.
yeah,
It doesn't give you numbers or anything like that. And a lot of accounts after the
yeah.
fact do so.
So this is a little bit. This isn't the worst bit, but this bit in the magazine, in Spin magazine, says by 1 p.m. hundreds of people began to strip down in the oppressive heat. Public displays of affection quickly gave way to public displays of copulation. Quote: nudity was all over the place, and so was public fornication. But you really got used to it. Now we'll get into stuff about the mosh pits later on, but it seems to me that stuff was started off slow and no one said, oi, quit it out. So if it's like, if I can get away with that, what else can I get away with?
And well, we've been to festivals, and listeners might have been to festivals, and we know it's like a place where as soon as people get through that security gate, it is a bit of let your inhibitions go, that kind of thing. I mean, the first festival I went to was Leeds. I was 18, and the moment I walked through the security gate and got over the little hill, there was a guy full on naked with his mate who had a dog lead tied around the end of his cock, and he was walking him around by it.
Yeah,
And that was my first impression of a music festival as an
right.
18-year-old. So, but it sets the tone of, oh, right, it's that kind of place. It's a little bit like lose your inhibitions, let anything goes type of thing. But there wasn't anything to the extent of what we're going to cover in a little bit. And
No, so
I think like watching the documentary, and that's what you see from the beginning, as it's all kids having fun, but it very quickly turns, and it doesn't seem like there was the opportunity taken to try and stop it.
I have thoughts about it, to be honest.
Okay.
So basically on the first day, there's an awful lot of nudity. There's lots of breasts on show. There's chants of show us your tits, show us your tits. There's people blocking girls' paths and they won't let them through until they get their boobs out. There's other stuff going on as well. There is rampant, let's call it what it is, there's rampant sexual assault going on in the mosh pits. There's girls with their tops off because it's hot and blokes around them going, I'm going to grab a feel of that.
Just grabbing it as you walk past. There's a lot of that you can see in the
and
footage.
I'd like to be like, what does anyone get from that?
I don't know. I don't know. But there's a and it mentions it. I think it mentions it in the documentary, but it's that they talk about MTV and Girls Gone Wild, and they talk about it feels like they are playing up for the cameras of MTV and the whole Girls Gone Wild scene, and that's what you're supposed to do.
Yes.
But there's nowhere near enough security to try and police it, and it doesn't seem like they're policing it enough themselves. And the majority of the crowd seem to be 20-year-old blokes.
Yes. I will say if a woman wants to get her boobs out on camera on MTV and that's what she wants to do, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
A stranger then comes on and grabs those boobs, that's sexual assault.
That's the the line that was crossed. And it's done like, throughout the whole weekend, the whole documentary, but it's never stopped. I know there's small snippets of the MTV crews or producers or something saying it was all around us all the weekend, and it was just kept happening, and there's like nothing we could do about it, and we could kind of see it was going to go
so
one way.
The first time that we kind of in the documentary we hear, actually it's probably the only time we hear someone actually on stage trying to, having seen it and stopped it, is Dexter Holland from The Offspring.
Yeah.
And he makes an announcement that they stop the show and he says, look, there seems to be lots of women coming over here that are getting assaulted. You need to fucking stop it.
Yeah.
It's not fucking right. And that's the only time any artist says like this is fucked up. Like, so fair play to Dexter Holland.
Yeah, that's all we see.
Yeah.
And but then, you know, there is footage of all the bands that are played anyway, and you don't see any of that embedded with any of them anyway. So it probably is correct that
Yeah.
nobody else did it. And to mention about numbers again in terms of the audience that attended of like 350,000, there was only 10,000 security staff, and that quickly dwindled after day one as
Yeah.
well.
I think a lot of people were going, I'll get a job as security, and that's a free ticket.
Yeah, and they were by all accounts they were poorly trained.
Mm-hmm.
They were. It talks about it in a documentary. They were put through an exam and they were basically told the answers and passed so that they could be part of it and be security because they had to fill their numbers. And as soon as they got there, they were taking the passes off and turning the shirts inside out and just joining the crowd.
Just dropping back to where you were saying about like going to these, it's your first festival, and you walk in the door and walking through the gate, and you see there's a guy naked, and there's probably someone, I don't know, juggling fire over there, and then there's something going tits in the mosh pit. One, because we're men, we see it different to women.
Yeah,
That's it. You know, that's it. That what we find intimidating or empowering or normal or that's quite funny is seen completely different by anyone really, but you know, a woman's point of view is different. But there's always kind of festivals I've been at, there's always been kind of an unwritten rule that you kind of look after each other, whether you're not just the people you go with. Like if someone goes down in a mosh pit, you're going to get them up.
yeah,
If you see someone being a dick, you're going to say, "Oh, stop being a dick."
yeah,
And there's kind of like that contract, which, you know, between like, this is a little bit mental. We're not used to this. We've got a free reign to do what we like. So let's just make sure we get through it together.
yeah, and get out okay.
And I feel that certainly as we go on through this weekend, that contract gets broken, if it was even there in the first place.
It disappears quick.
I love a mosh pit, and there was a time that me and a friend of mine, Dave, we like took pride in how we carried ourselves in the mosh pit. But moshing is just, to me, it's losing control, and you go in where the music takes you. You start off getting a bit of a bounce on, and then you might kind of bounce into someone who then pushes you away, and then you'll bounce into someone else, and you might get caught by an elbow on your way through, but there's no intentionality around it.
Yeah.
And we did notice around, I suppose, because we started going to gigs properly when we were like 16, 17. By the time we got to like 20, 21, 22, there seemed to be a little bit coming in of punches being thrown in mosh pits, and a deliberate act of trying to put one on someone almost. And that's what these mosh pits in the videos look like to me, is we can get away with having a fucking tear up here.
Yeah.
And that isn't part of this contract that I speak about at a festival, you know. It's
that's what I've seen, and being slightly older and going to gigs in my teens when I was, you know, we're talking in the noughties now, late noughties, then that's what the mosh pit turned into. It was just a fight, and people went there almost like they do go to football games in this country, preparing for the actual fight rather than the gig itself and watching the music and listening.
Offspring called out some of the groping and the inappropriate touching that was going on.
Yep.
And then after them, Korn played. And from what I've seen, that guy put absolutely fucking everything into that set.
Yeah.
So as much as Korn weren't for me, that looked like a performance and a half. Credit, I don't want it all to be horribleness, like that looked like an absolutely intense performance of the highest order. So
He says in the documentary about the performance and their set. He says that he came out and played the first song, and from there on he can't remember the rest of the gig because he was just kind of living on the vibes of we're playing a massive gig here. And if you watch the live um, footage, you can see the crowd go absolutely crazy when Korn come out and kick into that first song. And
so
it's just huge, isn't it? The amount of
yeah,
people.
like it's unbelievable. Like it looked scary. I actually went to bed after watching the documentary and seeing all those people, and because I was considering getting tickets to go and see Pearl Jam at Hyde Park
Right.
this summer, and I was like, oh, I don't know. And then I watched that. I was like, I do not want to be in a crowd anything close to that.
It's huge, isn't it?
Like it's like the sea. And again, I think the Limp Bizkit crowd the following day was even bigger.
Yeah.
But it's like it's just that moves, so that moves, and then that moves, and then that's going on over there, and it was just like unbelievable. But yeah. So on this spin article, they're saying for all the shit slinging, drug taking, VJ abusing, and spontaneous garbage hurling, the real action didn't get underway until Korn strode on stage at 9. And the center stage mosh pit raged with a concentrated ferocity. Now we've talked about briefly the violence, and it is violence in these mosh pits. It isn't moshing as I understand it. It is dudes having a tear up. Okay. So someone who was watching from his post at a vending machine table saw a vending machine, a vending tent next to the stage, saw 5 boys emerge from the mosh pit with blood-soaked t-shirts. The crowd was hectic, but it wasn't too bad at all. However, chaos erupts in the backstage medical tent. And this is another quote: when Korn came on, people were coming in every 3 minutes on stretchers.
Wow.
The medics had prepped for the expected it prepped for the expected bruises, lacerations, and broken bones, but every single person in their tent was ODing. A lot weren't conscious. One girl freaked out and broke the cot she was on. 7 EMTs tried to hold her down. She broke the restraints. They ended up having to duct tape her to a backboard. She tried to bite the EMTs.
Wow.
So there was a report of like, please try and stop people taking the liquid ecstasy. Much like in '69, it was don't take the brown acid.
Yeah.
So there's something mental was just severely going on, and I think we'll get into it later on with Metallica as well. I think there were a lot of what they thought was ODing was just hyperthermia.
Yeah.
So rather than being too cold, people getting too hot, and I think that displays similar symptoms to an overdose.
It's it by day 2 and 3, it's a culmination of all of that, isn't it?
Yeah,
Hypothermia, dehydration, taking substances, drinking alcohol, and it's all culminating in
yeah,
what happens. But
yeah.
so sort of rounding off on day 1.
This bit I just want
Oh
to
yeah,
get
yeah.
into this because I feel so this is the rough bit.
Okay.
This is really really rough, but I feel it's not fair to the victim to skirt over it. I think
Absolutely.
um and again this is from the article from Spin, and we'll leave a link to it if you want to read it. Where are we looking? So Dave Schneider was volunteering at Woodstock's Crisis Intervention Unit, watching Korn from the edge of the main pit. It was about 9:30. Schneider saw a crowd surfing woman get swallowed up by the pit. When she re-emerged, 2 men had clamped her arms to her sides. She was giving a struggle. Her clothes were physically and forcibly removed, yet no one seemed to react. Schneider said that the woman and one of the men fell to the ground for about 20 seconds, and then she was passed to his friend, who raped her standing from behind. The gentleman's pants were down. Why the fuck he's calling him a gentleman, I don't fucking know. Her pants were down. You could see there was clear sexual activity. Finally, the woman was pulled from the pit by some audience members who handed her to security. That should not be fucking happening at a concert. That shouldn't be fucking happening. But
No, but I
but
mean,
what's she gonna? She can't do anything about it at all.
and nothing it doesn't make sense. Full stop. But
No.
why did the other concert goers think it was a good idea to pick her out and give her to security after the fact?
Yeah,
Why didn't they step in
it's the
during and
break.
while it was happening? It
It's
was
that
there.
breakdown of the contract, isn't it? Well,
It's
I don't know. Is it fear of the pac-man mentality? Is it the fear that you'll be next? Is it like,
but
I don't know.
the fact that I mean, if you're at a festival or a gig anywhere in a
Fucking
crowd
look
and
after each other,
that's
like.
happening next to you, you don't look and think, well, that's a normal thing to see at a gig. It's just not, is it?
But
You
again,
wouldn't.
but when it's when the ratio is 10 bros to one woman,
Yeah, I mean, you do. I suppose you have to factor that in for people's thinking.
it's
I don't
fucking. It's
know.
just
It's
fucking. I didn't feel it is horrible. I don't feel we can talk about it without talking about it.
no. I think it needs to
That's
be
where I
covered
feel.
because
Yeah,
that's
that's
what
where I
happened.
feel the documentary kind of glossed over it. It was like, oh yeah, some boobs got groped,
Yeah,
and there was 2 rapes reported or 4 rapes reported.
yeah.
But
They don't. They don't go
who are
into
they going to
detail.
report it to?
Yeah,
I've read and heard during research of like people saying that they had heard that they heard anecdotally of at least like 20 women who had been raped on site, and yet only 4 were reported,
reported at the
and
time.
only one went to a conviction.
Yeah,
So like there's that breakdown. I suppose in by how do you hold someone to account if that happens in a crowd of 300,000 people?
and that's it, isn't it? I mean, the victim then goes out to the medical team. By the time she's actually been able to process what's gone on and maybe talked about who it was and how it happened and where it was, that person could have moved 3,000 people over
Yeah,
to another part of the crowd, and you would never find them
yeah.
in that time. Even though 99 wasn't a million years ago, but you wouldn't have found them, would you?
It
Um,
feels like it feels like it's almost like a social experiment. It's like, what if we put all these people in one room or in one place and deny them basic human decency? How quickly do they descend into fucking animals? And on that evidence, doesn't take long.
one day, half a day. I didn't realize that was on the first day or during the
Yeah,
first night.
so I think a lot of the time with this festival, the reporting, like the timelines get shifted around. Like I said
Yeah,
at the start, like if someone says to me, "What do you think of Woodstock '99?" I say Limp Bizkit riots, but there's a good at least 24 hours between those 2 events.
yeah, yeah.
So
Now I know that to to supplement when the bands and the acts had finished, there was a 24-hour rave going on,
yes.
which is obviously going to be drug fueled, isn't it, by the
Mm-hmm.
rest of the day and what we've seen so far. But during that, there's a lot of reports of the nudity,
Mm-hmm.
the public sexual displays, people just getting off and doing whatever they
Mm-hmm.
wanted in public while other people were around. Whether they, but from what I read, it sounded like that was all consensual stuff.
Yeah,
But what happens further into the night,
when you
I
can't
don't.
see just as well, and
Yeah,
yeah,
I don't know from that point on. There's not so
yeah.
many reports that I've seen. Um, so these people that are already high, drinking, just fueled up by the whole crowd and what they've seen and what they're doing, and then they go into a rave and they take more stuff and they drink more, whatever they can
Mm-hmm.
get a hold of. They don't sleep, and then they go into day two, and there's more of the same.